joining me on this video series. My name is Pastor Sam, and I'm going to talk to you about the life of Jesus. Yes, the life of Jesus. And so if you like this video, and I know you will, so just go ahead and hit that share button, like, subscribe, follow. That's the best support you can give anyone who's in social media. And so if you want to partner with me, you can. I would love it. I thank you in advance. There's a lot of ways you can help me out and help me in this ministry, help me spread this word, which I think is a good word, which is needed. Plus, it's informative, it's educational, and it's fun and exciting. At least it is to me anyway. So if you want to partner with me, let me know. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get started. In previous videos, we talked about the incarnation of Jesus Christ, simply meaning we believe he existed before time. We talked about the birth of Jesus, which was predicted some 700 years before he was born. Jesus was born to a virgin. It was an immaculate conception. We believe that the Holy Spirit, which is God's light, energy, filled a woman who was a virgin who knew not any man, and she gave birth. So Jesus' birth mother was Jewish and Hebrew, and Jesus was born into the Middle East and modern day Palestine. He spent some of his childhood in Egypt. He spent the majority of his life in what's modern day Lebanon. Jesus was pretty much unknown until he was around 30. We do know he had brothers and sisters because two of his brothers actually wrote 2 books in the Bible, so they became his followers. And so Jesus, some of his followers were actually his own family, particularly his first cousins. He was baptized by his first cousin, and that's when his ministry began. After Jesus' ministry began, we're told that he went into a wilderness where he fasted for 40 days. He was tempted of the devil and he won. And so then after that, Jesus chose his disciples, and he performed his first miracle, which was converting water into wine. And so then in my video series, I talked about Jesus' miracles. And so we concluded that video series. It's action-packed, so if you want to watch it, just go back and learn and read about Jesus' miracles, because his miracles is important into establishing Jesus' authority and his deity, because he was able to do miraculous things that not regular people could do. And on that note, I think I forgot to mention something during my miraculous video series, was that a lot of the stories that we are talking about are first-hand accounts. They're really people on the ground, like journalists. And most of these stories were written by Jesus' followers who were actually there. Not to mention that as we see some of the people who Jesus healed, the ones that are called by name, Bible tradition tells us that these individuals actually became followers of Jesus. So a lot of the people we hear, like Blind Bartimaeus and the woman with the issue of blood and Jairus' daughter, these names of these people, Malchus, the soldier's ear who was healed, actually became Jesus' followers. And so not only did Jesus heal them, not only did they tell people their stories, but they told crowds and crowds of people. And it was well known during Jesus' time and shortly thereafter that Jesus was who he said he was. Not until now are we seeing people start to question the validity of what was already recorded. And so we know that Jesus did exist. We do know he did miraculous things. What is controversial is who Jesus is to each of us. Some say he's a prophet. Some say he's just a wise man. Some says he's even maybe just an angel. But we say he is God. Let me just digress a little. I know it makes some people uncomfortable to say that Jesus is God. What I do think it's important to recognize that everyone is entitled to their own beliefs. I do not believe that God will judge or condemn anyone for any thoughts and beliefs that are pure in their heart. For instance, there are people who were born and raised in different parts of the world who never had a chance to learn about some of the things that you and I have a chance to learn about. So I don't believe that God is going to hold them accountable for something they know nothing about. also believe that God has the ability to reveal himself. We call him a him, but God is not a him. He's not a he. He's not a she. He's not a it. He's not that. God described himself as I am, which means I am everything. I'm your deliverer. I'm your rock. I'm your salvation. I'm your healer. God is the ultimate life force, the ultimate energy. He has the ability to communicate and manifest in any way he wants. We as Christians believe that he chose Jesus as his human form. That's why we believe Jesus is the Son of God. This video, we're beginning a new series. We're going to talk about parables. Now, I think one of Jesus' most underrated qualities is his ability to teach and reach people. We almost take it for granted now in this society of self-help coaches and preachers and evangelists and the charismatic people of the world. But you have to understand, Jesus in our modern day was the one who really taught us how to interact with crowds, how to speak to crowds, how to teach and reach people on their level. When we study the word parable in the Greek translation, it literally means comparison. So a parable is a story or an illustration. It's a way for a teacher to use a comparison, to look at a very familiar thing to introduce an unfamiliar thing. And so as we study these parables, it's important to recognize that not everything we're discussing is literal, nor do I believe everything in the Bible is literal. It's really not important. What's important is that you get the message behind the story. And so Jesus does not get his due credit as the greatest teacher of all time. You're going to start to see that as we move forward, that a lot of his sayings are things that we say and do today. Now, that doesn't seem important to you now, but understand 2,000 plus years ago, that's just not how it was. So not only was Jesus' impact on the world found through now we have billions of people who call him Lord, Savior, Messiah, but then we have even more billions of people who mimic and copy his style and his teaching and his charisma. And that's what's lost in Jesus, was his charisma, his ability to teach and reach people. So we're going to talk about that on this video series and several more video series to go, where we're going to talk about Jesus' parables, which we're simply saying his teachings, his sayings, and hopefully you can gather something from studying these sayings and these teachings, and that will improve your life or help you to improve someone else's. That's what we're here for. The parable we're going to look at is found in Luke chapter 4, verse 23. We're told that Jesus is in his hometown of Nazareth. And so Jesus at this time, ministry was well underway. He had garnered a reputation, interesting enough, outside of his hometown, but yet in a nearby enough region where his hometown folk heard about his popularity. Well, as it turns out, Jesus was in his hometown, and some of the hometown folk started to say to Jesus, well, we hear that you're healing all these people, so heal yourself. And so that's where we get the phrase or the saying or the proverb or the wise saying, physician, heal thyself. It was a condescending tone that these people had towards Jesus. The significance in that is that it was hypocrisy. They were simply chiding Jesus or making fun of him, undermining his authority. And we find that Jesus simply responded to them by saying, you want me to heal myself, even though I have shown you I have the ability to heal. It's almost like us going into our doctor's office, and as our doctor diagnoses us, we tell the doctor, okay, since you diagnose me, now diagnose yourself, in order to prove to me that you're an actual doctor. And so again, this is just a wise saying, Jesus' way of saying to the crowds, because remember, he would have done this in front of his disciples and probably in front of a crowd of people, of saying that you are a hypocrite by asking me to heal myself or to do something that I've already done. The second parable is found in the book of Matthew 13 and 57. And we're told that Jesus says that a prophet is not respected in his own hometown. Again, we're kind of building upon that first parable where Jesus was not even accepted in his very homeland, even though they knew of him. But Jesus had more respect and more of a following outside of his hometown. And so this type of saying is simply saying to us, or this parable, this proverb, or this wise saying is saying that it's harder to gain the respect of the people that's closest to you. Isn't that a word for you right there? Jesus simply is saying a prophet has no honor except outside of his hometown. So maybe some of you out there, you probably found it hard to impress your mother, your father, your brother, sister, maybe even your spouse. Other people honor you. Other people respect you. Other people know who you are, but the people closest to you, you can't convince them of anything. They just have their mind made up. And so, again, this is just a wise saying and a teaching that Jesus had. This next miracle is found in Matthew 9 and 12. Next parable. I've been saying miracles for so long, but next parable. And this wise saying is another wise saying of Jesus illustrating a physician. And so we have to understand ancient culture. In those days, a physician was not someone who we think of today as scientists or someone who has medications and even does surgeries. But a physician would have been a wise person who has the ability to help others, probably, yes, in some medicinal type of way, I'm sure using herbs or natural remedies. And so we see that Jesus says in this particular parable and saying that only the sick has need of a physician. What this really truly means is that Jesus proclaimed that he came into the world for the lost. In other words, people don't go see the doctor when they're well. Jesus is our doctor. He's our healer. And so he is here for those who are broken, for those who need healing, and those who are sick. This next miracle, Jesus is talking about money. Yes, money. Jesus did discuss money actually quite a bit. A lot of people think that money is a taboo subject, but it's really not. It's a part of our everyday life, and we should know how to handle it accordingly and spiritually. Well, Jesus teaches us one of the principles of how to handle money when he says in Matthew 6 and 21 that where your treasure is, your heart is also. Now, most of us can understand what that means, but I'll break it down. It's simply meaning whatever you put into something the most, wherever you spend the most of your energy and time, that's what you believe in. And I think that's the dilemma with some of us in a very busy society. We're all working. We're all trying to achieve certain things. Well, we can't lose sight of money is not the end of all ends. Yes, we have to work. Yes, we have to have a savings account. But that should not take precedence over building up relationships with people, out of being kind and compassionate. And we live in a society of greed and condescendingness, condescension. And so what that simply means is that Jesus is saying to you, wherever your treasure is, if your treasure is your home, if your treasure is your job, if your treasure is clothes, sex, whatever your treasure is, that's your heart. And wherever you put all your energy and time, your heart will follow. Jesus is saying it's not bad to have money, but you need to give God your heart. This is one of my favorite sayings, and I really like all of them, but this one is particularly makes me chuckle all the time. It's found in Luke 6 and 39, as well as a lot of the parables or sayings are found throughout the Bible, but primarily the ones we're talking about with Jesus, of course, are found in either Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. This one, Jesus is saying the blind leads the blind, and they both end up in the ditch. Now, that's funny. You have to look at the context of what Jesus was saying. Essentially, in Jesus' time, you've heard me touch on this, the religious leaders of that time, in Jesus' time, the authoritative figures, people like we would call priests or ministers or reverends or deacons today were the Pharisees and the scribes, particularly the Pharisees who were at odds with Jesus. Why were they at odds with Jesus? Because they had religious customs and doctrines, and they were dogmatic, and they had all these formal things they wanted to do. And Jesus kind of defied that, not in the negative way of defiance, but Jesus had a new approach. His approach was one of compassion, love, forgiveness, and salvation. And so when Jesus' disciples came to him and asked him, well, should we do some of what the Pharisees are telling us? And Jesus simply says that the blind lead the blind, and they both end up in the ditch. And that's a word for us today. That can be a spiritual word. That can be a practical word. It's be careful who you listen to, right? So I like sayings like eagles fly high, chickens fly low. So you definitely want to align yourself with someone who can help you go the right way. Jesus said it over 2,000 years ago. The blind lead the blind, and they both end up in the ditch. This particular wise saying is found in the book of John 13:6. This is a little bit of a controversial wise saying because some people believe that during the time of slavery, American slavery, that is, because I could have an international audience, but during the time of American slavery, where the Europeans enslaved Africans here in the United States, that they did use some Christian sayings to try to convince servants or slaves that they were not supposed to talk back or rebel against their master or teacher. But that's not what the scripture is saying. Jesus, one, he's just using a comparison. He's not saying literally, servant, you must serve your master at all times. What Jesus is saying to us is respect authority. How many times do we not see that today where everyone knows everything? No one wants to be told what to do. Everyone wants to have a title. Everyone wants to be important. That's fine and great. But each one of us can learn something from someone. And each one of us has some authority figure over us. I don't care who you are. Even the president has to answer to Congress. And so that's what Jesus was saying. He was saying that even the servant must answer to his master, simply meaning we have one who is above us. What Jesus was simply saying to his disciples was, I am the Christ. I am the anointed one. I am your leader. Follow me. This next miracle is found in Luke chapter 6, verse 41. A lot of Jesus' sayings, a lot of his parables, his proverbs, his wise sayings were revolutionary at the time. Maybe not as impactful to us today because we have really benefited from Jesus' teachings. But in this particular wise saying, he's calling out hypocrites. Now, we already studied and we know by now Jesus' sworn enemies, and they weren't the enemies that he created, was that these were people who just didn't like Jesus because he threatened their power, which was the religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees, and Jesus was describing them as being hypocrites. This is revolutionary at the time because no one really would ever question authority figures, especially in those days in a highly religious culture. But Jesus was bold enough to say to these religious leaders, how dare you judge? How dare you criticize? How dare you point out something that someone else has when you are just as bad or even worse? And that goes on a lot today. Everyone can sit up and talk about what the other person has done and how wrong they are, but we don't ever look in the mirror and see who we are. Jesus simply said, how can you miss the big object in your eye looking for the speck in my eye? Let's all do that. Let's do a self-evaluation before we go knocking on other people's doors. The next wise saying is found in Matthew chapter 7, verse 6. We're told that Jesus told his disciples, do not cast your pearls among the swine. That again is just, that's just great teaching. Again, we probably take it for granted now. You've probably heard your pastor probably preach something like that in his own way. But remember, in these days, just no one really taught that way. And what Jesus was simply saying is watch who you hang out with. Pearls, of course, are something that's very valuable and delicate. And pigs, of course, are something that's very dirty. And so why would you cast or throw or associate something that's good and pure and precious and worthwhile among something that could get it dirty? So you could talk about relationships going there. You could talk about your energy, as people like to talk about. You can even talk about your mindset and how we think. And so Jesus was really painting a brilliant analogy of how we should be above the fray. We should hold ourselves accountable. We should not lower ourselves in any situation, whether it be morally, spiritually, emotionally, physically. Do not cast your pearls among the swine. This is another one of my favorite sayings. I say it a lot. It's found in Matthew 7:16. And Jesus said, "You will know a tree by the fruit it bears." Well, you can take that and run with it. You can talk all day long about it. But the way I see it is that a person can tell you, "I'm this and I'm that," but all you have to do is watch them to see who they truly are. In other words, someone can say, "I'm an apple tree," but when you see the tree blossoms and oranges come off of it, not apples, then that person is not an apple tree. It's an orange tree. What Jesus is simply saying is be wise and pay attention. Don't just believe everything people tell you. Of course, during Jesus' time, it was the religious leaders of the day who were portraying themselves as holy or better than other folk, right? Well, Jesus is saying, pay attention to these people who are telling you what to do. Are they doing what they tell you to do? Man, that can ring home today, right? We can all find fault in other people, right? We can chastise one another, but are we chastising ourselves? And do we have the authority to do it? Well, how do I know you have the authority to do it? Are you who you say you are? What type of fruit do you bring? Is it sour fruit? Is it sweet fruit? Is it good fruit? Does the fruit last? Are you sharing your fruit? Or are you just that fig tree that Jesus cursed that has no fruit, that is pretending to be a fruit tree and there's nothing there? It's dead. I hope you enjoyed this video series. I know it's pretty long. We've got a lot of parables, teachings, and wise sayings to get through. We'll hit about 8, 9, or 10 on each video, and we will learn more about Jesus and his teachings and his sayings. As we learn more about Jesus' teachings, we're learning more about Jesus. This is a Jesus series. We're talking about the life of Jesus. Jesus was one of the greatest teachers of all time. And the way we know he was a great teacher is we study his teachings. So his wise sayings, his parables, his proverbs are not meant to be taken literally, but yet they're meant to illuminate us into godly, spiritual principles that will enhance our everyday life. Don't take everything so literal, so serious. Just absorb it. Feast on it, pray on it. Until